You are listening to the Spactastic Mysteries podcast. We are listening to Anna Gale Lyne's first novel in the Jaguar and Peacock series, Who Killed Ben? Federal agent and seasoned space vessel commander Jessa Strasser emerges from the wreckage of a devastating accident that claimed the life of her beloved husband, Ben. Returning to her duties with a heavy heart, she grapples with grief and unanswered questions, determined to uncover the truth behind the tragedy that shattered her world. As Jessa sifts through the remnants of her past life, she stumbles upon a mysterious box of items left behind by Ben. Within its depths lies a chilling revelation: the accident that claimed Ben's life was no mere mishap, but a deliberate act of sabotage. This is episode 3, Who is in Charge? If you have not subscribed, do so now, and if you are on YouTube, hit the bell to be notified of new episodes.
In the meantime, I pressed my comlet, a wrist-worn communication device. Every crew member on board wore a comlet. To prevent others from using someone else's comlet, the communication devices were programmed not to work until it verified its user's thumbprint. I spoke into it, Navigator Rappaport, set a course to intercept the USS Miranda. The Liberty's cargo holds brimmed with medical supplies ready for distribution to the front-line star vessels. The first being the Miranda. Chip, place a direct call to Lieutenant General Graham on a very secure channel. I charged my computer, leaning back in my black, leather, swivel chair. I grabbed the arms of my chair tightly. When the general came into view, he pushed his silver-rimmed glasses up with his finger as he pored over his quan pad. He sat at the metal desk in his office. He displayed his diplomas and awards on the wall behind him. I had stared at that wall many times during my career as an agent. His office had been the place I ran to when I needed advice, to vent or just to talk. And Graham would give me just the right perspective, advice, or encouraging word, slowly but surely shaping me into the agent I had become. His lips broke into a smile as he noticed me. "Did you like the present I sent you? Did you know anything about its contents?" "No, did you find something interesting in there?" Graham answered, leaning forward. He pressed his eyebrows together. "You must have, or you wouldn't be wearing your 'we've got trouble' look." I held his stare as I moved to the edge of my seat. "We have reason to believe that the accident that killed Ben was deliberate." "What in Ben's box would give you that impression?" Graham prodded, steepling his fingers. I hit a button on the edge of the screen. The circular disc popped out almost as if it were bread in a toaster. Holding up the disc, I replied, "From this. Ben videotaped a message to me, saying that he stumbled onto the Crimson Fleet's plans to make a deadly biological weapon." I looked back at Graham. "They plan to use it on every Freedom Alliance star vessel in the fleet." Graham tilted his head to one side. Did the Crimson Fleet know that he knew this information? They made several attempts on his life. I set the disc on my desk and chewed on my bottom lip for a few seconds before adding, "And now I suspect they are coming after me." "Thus the accident," Graham concluded, twisting his mouth. "You want the go-ahead to investigate this, don't you?" "Ben left me all his logs, Graham." Suddenly, when I noticed a look of concern sweep over his face, I demanded, "Do Jaguar and I have permission to launch an investigation or not?" A few minutes of silence passed before Graham leaned back in his chair. "Normally, I would say no, because you and Jaguar are family," he began, folding his arms across his chest. "But who would know Ben better than Ben's wife and brother? You can anticipate the moves he made that led him to discovering the Crimson Fleet's biological weapon, whereas another agent could not. Is that a yes?" "Yes, I want you and Jaguar to put a stop to this biological weapon as soon as possible," he clarified, unfolding his hands, leaning forward again. This time, his face became drawn. "Promise me you won't take any unnecessary risks. Now that we've got you back, I don't want you to get hurt again." I chuckled. "I promise." I put my hand up to stop him from ending the transmission. "What do you know about Ben's partner?" "Her name's Natasha Austin, but she disappeared a month after Ben died." He searched my face for answers. "You haven't seen her lately, Peacock, have you?" "Not since our encounter at the hospital," I told him, rolling my eyes. "Any truth to the rumor that she is a double agent?" He ran his fingers through the remainder of his red hair. "It's a definite possibility," he answered, in a flippant tone. His attempt at sidestepping around the truth, I suspected. What was he hiding from me? And why? It wasn't as if I was just another agent under his charge. He and I were good friends. We even dated briefly. He usually confided in me, and if he didn't, that could only mean that the information required me to be of a higher security clearance. More than a definite possibility. Morgan Kramer confirmed it for me 2 days before Ben died. "We have no concrete facts, just a lot of hearsay," he explained. He smiled, then the screen went blank. Yeah, he was definitely withholding information. But what was it? And why? Twirling around to study the notes written on the marker board, suppressing the urge to scream, my comlet beeped. "Colonel Strasser, Lieutenant Colonel Polk is insisting on seeing you," my company clerk announced. I grabbed the rope cord, yanking the curtain back in place. Snatching the box of Ben's logs, I shoved it under the desk. No need to alert Polk that there is a spy on board, I told myself. Pressing my thumb to the center of the comlet, I told my company clerk, Gregory Stone, "Let her in." My spirited, African-American company clerk sat behind a reception desk outside my office. He acted as gatekeeper between my crew and me. He only permitted people in whom he deemed worthy. Polk marched into my office. I still couldn't figure out where I'd seen her before. Maybe Polk changed her hair color or had plastic surgery. "We will be reaching the Miranda in a day and a half." "Why are we intercepting the Miranda, anyway?" Polk asked in a tone that sounded more like an accusation than a question. Her hands on her hips. Leaning forward in my chair, I plopped my elbows on my desk. "We are delivering medical supplies to the space vessels on the front lines," I explained to my first officer. "Pretty routine stuff. In the meantime, I will be in here working on a project for General Graham. Call me, Polk, if anything unusual happens." "You know, it should have been me in that chair, not you," Polk snarled, looking me in the eye, "and it will be, Colonel. You are too weak, too spineless, to be in command." Sliding my hand under my hair, I fingered the long scar on the side of my neck. Those words, too weak and too spineless, brought back memories of my father, the great Dr. Harrison Strasser. He took every opportunity to tell me how weak, how spineless, how worthless I was. Nothing pleased him. Not straight A's. Not being married. Not making colonel. He dismissed me as a real person the moment he found out I was female. That was his opinion, but it in no way defined who I was. I managed to become a successful, intelligent, strong woman, not because of him but in spite of him. Bigger people than you have tried to take me down. Immediately, I stood up. Behind my back, I tapped my comlet twice, signaling that I needed security at once. "And yet, I am still here," I continued in a cold tone as I walked around my desk to face Polk. "You can huff, you can puff, but it will be you who will be blown down." "And what are you going to do to me?" Polk mocked, narrowing her eyes. "Poor Colonel. Your bodyguard isn't here to defend you." Polk tilted her head slightly, gave me a sad expression, thrusting out her bottom lip. The same look Reggie used to give Ben. "I don't need Major Masters to defend me." I grabbed Polk's arm, flew her into the air and dropped her on the ground. Putting my boot on Polk's chest to prevent her from getting up, I advised Polk, "That was just a friendly warning. Cross me again and you won't see the outside of the infirmary for months." "I'd take that advice if I were you. I've seen offenders after they've tangled with her," a masculine voice instructed Polk. I looked up into the face of Nate. 2 security officers stood behind him. Then I questioned Nate, "How much did you catch?" I took my foot off Polk's chest. "Enough," Nate said, pulling Polk to her feet by the collar of her black flight coveralls. "I don't like the way you spoke to the colonel," he ground through his teeth, pushing her against the wall. Touching his nose to hers, he stared into her eyes. His hands still pressing against her chest. "You can't take down the colonel, and you know why." She didn't flinch. Because the colonel has something you don't, he lectured, pausing to let her think about his statement. Her friends and family, even the officers who have previously served with her, are fiercely loyal to her. He motioned his head in my direction, leaning his other hand against the wall. You might be able to relieve the colonel of that chair and get rid of me, but one of her loyal friends will hunt you down. He took his hand off the wall, clutching her wrist. You can get rid of that one too, but another will pop up and another and another. He removed his hand from her chest. Putting his hand on the small of her back, he turned Poke toward the awaiting officers. Maybe a few days in the brig will cure that bad attitude of yours. An officer stepped behind Poke and slapped a pair of handcuffs on her wrists. Nate released her to the officer, who led her toward the door. You can't keep me, Poke called over her shoulder. You have nothing to hold me on, Major. Insubordination, threatening a colonel, Nate replied, counting them off on his fingers. On those charges alone, I can hold you until we have a court-martial. Once the guards escorted Poke out of my office, Nate turned to me, placing his hand on my shoulder. Are you okay? Yeah, I'm fine. I rounded the corner of my desk, sinking into my chair. I caught his eye and chastised, you don't have to be so protective of me. I can defend myself. He took a seat in the chair he occupied before he left for the staff meeting. The one closest to me. He glanced back at the door. I think you made that abundantly clear. Then why are you treating me like a 2-year-old? I retorted, anger flashed in my eyes. When I caught the pained expression on his face, I picked up my Quan pad. Can we start going through Ben's logs? Or do you have other pressing matters to attend to? His face hardened, his lips pursed in suppressed fury before he returned, nothing is more pressing than finding my brother and nephew's killer. Reaching down under the desk, I pulled out a stack of button-sized discs from the box. Briefly peering up at Nate, I said in a voice as cold as winter in Alaska, then we agree. Without looking up again, I dropped the disc in the slot on the side of the screen. Chip, I instructed, play the disc. When Ben appeared on the screen, my heart felt as if it dropped into my stomach. I would never again feel the warmth of his hand in mine. I would never again taste his heart-shaped buttermilk pancakes that he made any Saturday morning that we found ourselves home at the same time. I would never again feel his lips pressing against mine. Yet here he was on the screen of my computer, seeming so tranquil and full of life. Agent Benjamin Masters log, January 5, 2150. Agent Austin and I are assigned to investigate the disappearance of the USS Washington. We found the star vessel abandoned very close to Bravo 8. Nate and I exchanged glances. I echoed what we were both thinking, the Crimson Fleet owns Bravo 8. After boarding the Washington, we found that the star vessel seems to have been badly damaged in a battle of some sort, continued Ben. He paced back and forth in front of a large chair in what appeared to be a small vessel. Maybe a landing craft, I observed. Engineering and Command Central appear to be ransacked as if intruders boarded the Washington after she was injured. There are no people aboard. Masters out. The Washington was a vessel similar to this one. At least 300 people should have been on board, Nate noted, giving me a look of uneasy puzzlement. 300 people can't just disappear. Maybe the Crimson Fleet took them as prisoners. Perhaps, I consented, steepled my fingers and leaned back in my chair. But the Crimson Fleet's philosophy is the survival of the fittest, I went on, trying to explain my position. So if the Washington had been in a battle, one that crippled them, don't you think that the Crimson Fleet would have left the injured and dead crew members? And if the Washington was badly injured, there must have been casualties. He folded his hands behind his head, narrowing his eyes speculatively. If that's the case, where are they? I shrugged my shoulders. I don't know. I intertwined my fingers and rested them on my lap. I do think, however, that we should go through the remaining logs before jumping to any conclusions. Nate slowly nodded his head. Ben could have already found the bodies, Nate concluded, giving me a leisurely once-over. In any case, it's going to be a long night. I have to check on things in Command Central, I told Nate, my face twisted in pain as I moved to the edge of my chair. Go see the doctor, I reminded myself mentally. Setting up a regular physical therapy schedule will help manage the pain. I caught Nate's despairing look, then suggested, but why don't we have dinner in my quarters, say, around 1800 hours? After dinner, we can drudge through some more of Ben's logs. It's a date, Nate answered, rising from his chair. Heat rose to Nate's cheeks, his eyes widened. I'm so sorry, I didn't mean it like that. The tension solidified between us once again. I know what you meant. I stood, turned the corner of my desk and headed for the door. I'll see you at 1800 hours. Together we walked through the sliding doors, then parted ways. I continued to Command Central while Nate proceeded to the security office.
If you would like to learn more about Anna Gale or to buy her science fiction novels, please visit annagalelines.com. You can follow her on social media. It's author Anna Gale on Facebook. Anna Gale Lines on Twitter and Pinterest. Anna Gale Lines Artist on Instagram. Lady Anna Gale on TikTok. At Space Static Mysteries on YouTube. Thank you for listening, and thank you for being you.